In the comment section of a recent video where I was discussing the upcoming Skyrim Let's Play, a number of people asked about the character Leonard. In fact, one person even asked for a short summary of the character and his history. And so without further ado, this is the story of a man named Leonard. Or it might be. You see, we're not entirely sure as to who Leonard is. Leonard is known for having a somewhat fluid relationship with the truth. All we really know about him is that he came to Skyrim with a plan. For in the trouble and strife that war brings, there are opportunities for a man to make his mark. And I'm not talking about making your mark in battle or through some heroic act of courage. No, I'm talking about the sort of opportunities that come along for a man not weighed down by a moral compass. Unfortunately, Leonard's plan hit two problems pretty much immediately. The first problem was a dragon. The second was a complete lack of anything, basically. He had no money, he had no valuables to sell, he didn't even possess pants. I need to get out of here, avoid getting eaten by the dragon, and find a decent tailor. Leonard's solution to the first problem was to scream an awful lot and run away. Leonard's solution to the second problem took a little more time and effort. Although it has to be said, it also involved a small amount of screaming and running away. Now Leonard, having a good head for business, realized that the only real way to make money if you don't already have some money is to take it from those that do. And thus he ended up in Riften joining the Thieves Guild. But Leonard found himself a little disappointed by the Thieves Guild, and indeed the entire life of a thief in general. It turned out that lifestyle involved an awful lot of physical activity, getting your hands dirty, and more than a few moments of extreme danger. Three things that Leonard could not stand in the least. And so Leonard decided to hire someone to handle the more physical side of things for him. And this led him to the jail in Riften, where he met somebody called Inigo, a Khajiit who'd fallen on bad times and needed the sort of helping hand that only someone as magnanimous as Leonard could give. It wasn't immediately obvious to Leonard, but this was possibly the best decision of his life. Because not only did Inigo save his life on multiple occasions, he did go on to become Leonard's only true friend. Now Leonard did go on to end up running the Thieves Guild and managed to amass enough gold and other resources to begin the next stage of his plan. Unfortunately, whilst celebrating this particular turn of events, there was an unfortunate accidental murder. And this brought Leonard to the attention of the Dark Brotherhood. You see, whilst Leonard wasn't exactly a very good thief, he did have one particular talent. He was an exceptionally good poisoner. Initially, this seemed to be a particularly lucky break for Leonard, who tended to think of assassins as darkly dressed, suave, sophisticated and stylish killers who were targeting only the best of the best in society. Unfortunately, they turned out to be nothing more than a group of murder hobos living in a squalid little dungeon and lacking any sense of style or personal hygiene. They did, however, grant Leonard the chance to cement himself as the undisputed leader of the criminal underworld, at least in Skyrim. But of course Leonard wanted more, and thus began his quest to gain influence in Skyrim's more well-to-do and affluent society. And what better way to achieve this than owning property in all the major cities, land out in the countryside, and perhaps a title or two. He wanted to be a Thane, not just of one or two holds, but of absolutely everywhere. The problem is, having money didn't open as many doors as Leonard had assumed. It seems Nords have an odd idea as to what makes a good neighbour. Is this a Nord thing? We don't sell houses to rich people until they've proved they can murder people for us. Fortunately, in his spare time, Leonard had become somewhat of a relic hunter for the Museum of the Dragonborn, a prestigious establishment very close to the Blue Palace. This not only raised Leonard's status as a man of means, it also meant that he did have a small amount of experience achieving the sort of tasks that would impress the locals in Skyrim, and thus win the favour of their jarls. Unfortunately, whilst performing one such task, he accidentally joined the Mages Guild. Initially, he planned to find the person he wanted to speak to and then get out of there. But then somebody said something that piqued his interest.
The college has undertaken a fascinating excavation in the ruins of Sarthal nearby.
And so he decided to stay. And whilst his magical abilities were poor at best, but it keeps he somehow managed to use his other skills to climb the ladder and ended up being appointed the Archmage. Probably because they needed a figurehead who could keep the rest of Skyrim off their backs and wouldn't interfere with the day-to-day running of the college. But that actually suited Leonard just fine. The next phase of Leonard's life is one he'd rather forget. It involves dragons. And there's not really much to say about this period of his adventure, other than it did not end well. Dragon! What? Guys, I got some pretty bad news. I'm afraid, I have a feeling your leader Parthenax has been eaten by a dragon.
Where do you want to go?
Anything to declare?
Yeah, don't play with dragons. After this, Leonard decided to refocus his efforts on becoming the Thane of Everywhere. Unfortunately, he hit yet another little snag, and that was Windhelm. Not just because it's Windhelm, but because there was a civil war going on. And so he enlisted into the Imperials and valiantly led the troops to victory against the Stormcloaks. Well, I say led. He sort of stood at the back, waved his sword and made an awful lot of noise, but it pretty much achieved the same thing. And thus, Leonard finally became the Thane of Everywhere. At this point, our hero had achieved so very much. He had titles all across Skyrim, he had houses, he had manors, he had land. But he didn't have a castle, and he felt that a man of his stature really did deserve one. Fortunately, he knew of a castle just off the north coast. It had an excellent view, a somewhat chilly climb, but it was currently inhabited by a group of somewhat unpleasant vampires. And so he enlisted a local group of vampire slayers called the Dawn Guard to clear the castle for him. Well, it was a little more complicated than that, and it involved an awful lot of running away and screaming once again. It involved a trip to the Soul Cairn and the loss of part of his soul, which was somewhat unpleasant. But in the end, he was victorious and he had his castle. But while a castle is a fine thing to have on your resume, and every good gentleman should own one, they're kind of dark and creepy, so he didn't really want to spend much time there. But a castle was not the only thing Leonard acquired with the aid of the Dawn Guard. No, he also acquired very powerful allies. Allies that would help him in another endeavour. You see, Leonard had helped build a guild of explorers within the Museum of the Dragonborn, a guild devoted to uncovering relics and artifacts of historical importance, items that belonged to kings, emperors, heroes, and legends of the past. The sorts of items that would be hidden away in the most secret of places and protected by the strongest and most powerful of guardians. But with these new allies, Leonard was able to track down these items one by one, overcoming any dangers that they would face, until the trail led to Solstein. Now, Solstein also happened to be the home of somebody claiming to be the first Dragonborn, and this Dragonborn really didn't seem to like Leonard and had sent numerous groups of assassins to basically remove him. And so Leonard and Inigo set forth to have a stern word with this gentleman and pick up the items on their to-do list. Unfortunately, Solstein is an unpleasant place filled with ash and tentacles. It's also home to one of the most annoying people that has ever existed. And no, I don't actually mean the Dragonborn attempting to kill Leonard. I'm talking about someone named Neloth. In spite of all this unpleasantness, Leonard did in fact find the item he came for, and many more. He also managed to deal with this first Dragonborn fellow, and he did it all whilst resisting the urge to murder Neloth. Now, I'd like to tell you that the final battle between Leonard and this first Dragonborn was an epic tale of heroism that would be written in the stars themselves, but I'd be lying. Let's just say it was successful and leave it at that. What's probably more important to focus on is the fact that from this entire encounter, Leonard came away with a new power. The power to command dragons. Leonard no longer feared dragons. Well, that's probably not true. I mean, they're dragons, they're still bloody terrifying. But he now felt that they were also a useful resource that he could use, a weapon in his arsenal, a tool with which he could shape his own destiny. And so, with an unfamiliar air of confidence, Leonard set forth to claim relic after relic, artifact after artifact, until he finally came to a place where he could reforge the Amulet of Kings. The amulet that could only be worn by the true Emperor of Tamriel. Now, the fact that Leonard can wear the Amulet of Kings, and does so at every available opportunity, it doesn't mean anything, really, because the Covenant of Akatosh has been broken. Everybody knows this. But what Leonard knows is that what people believe can change, and what people think, well, that can be manipulated.